Well, shooters and reloaders out there, Fortune Cookie 45LC coming to you from the Hot Lad Zone. And this video is a look back at how far and how quickly we have come in the electronic age. Now, many of you out there have no idea what this is. It is a transistor radio from the 1950s. And before this, the technology was vacuum tubes. These vacuum tubes allowed the amplification of tiny signals transmitted through the air, radio waves, and converted the signals back into sound with a little speaker. And that's how all that electronics worked back in those days, with vacuum tubes. The family radio was a big thing, and many radio shows entertained the American population for many years. And when the radio went on the blink, it was because a vacuum tube burned out, and a repairman had to be called in to find out which vacuum tube had gone bad, change it out, and put the radio back into operation. And the same thing happened with TV. The first TVs were all vacuum tubes. The main difference between TV and radio was that the TV had this huge vacuum tube called a picture tube. And the way that worked was it was a large vacuum tube that had electromagnets around it that bent the electron beams that when they hit the screen would cause a phosphor to light up, and that would make the picture. And woe it was to the family that when the TV went on the blink, it was because not just one of the little vacuum tubes had burned out, but the main picture tube had burned out, and that was an expensive fix. But the significance of the transistor radio was that the vacuum tube was no longer in vogue, because the transistor replaced all of the vacuum tubes. And what transistors were was, instead of a glass tube that was a vacuum that had electron beams running through it and capacitance and inductance and resistance and all that kind of thing, instead of those vacuum tubes, it was all compressed into a transistor. Amplification of impulses and signals was still a big thing. That's why you see here this says ampico. Well, what transistors did was created a solid state vacuum tube. And it was in the same time that Disneyland started and Colt Python came to market. And that was also the time that the Ruger Super Blackhawk and the Smith & Wesson Model 29 in 44 Magnum came out. Elvis Presley was just making his name, and Marilyn Monroe was huge. Crest toothpaste and all that kind of thing, the first transistor radios came online. And not only that, but the Sony Corporation came into being in 1955. And what came about because of the transistor, like this one says, 8-transistor radio, high fidelity. What came about after that was your solid state circuit boards, and that heralded in the coming of the chips that we have today. And the vacuum tubes that were the picture tubes are now screens that are light emitting diodes and plasma screens and all this kind of thing. So we've come a long way since the transistor radio. But this was big, and yet it was small. You could put this in your shirt pocket. And
or on the right hand shoulder. Also, traffic congestion in downtown San Jose. Slow
it was the coming of the 9-volt battery.
Center on First Street and traffic both
with
directions of East and 3rd Street between Vine and 11th
with these
Street.
little radios.
This update is brought to you by the Knee and Back Pain Helpline. Learn how an insurance covered.
So I've kept this ever since the 1960s, and this company no longer is in existence anymore, but you can still find these things because they are floating around, and so many of them were made. So shooters and reloaders out there, take care. This is a trip down memory lane with the transistor radio. Bye for now.